Welcome to Dishn with Andy. This episode, it's a little later than I normally would like to film it. Our town is replacing a bunch of water pipes, and when they shut the valve off on one of them, it burst, and we had a boil order for a few days, and it was really bad. Couldn't even wash dishes or anything like that unless you boiled water. Was without water for the whole first night of it. So I'm glad that's over. Just kind of a weird thing, just kind of a side note. So today we're going to talk about a true crime event, veering away from movies and entertainment for a little bit. And I took a lot of notes here. And so I got them pulled up on an old tablet here, and one I don't care if it gets wet or anything, it's ancient. But I'm going to talk about something and just give my opinions on it, my feelings on it. So we're going to talk about the Circleville, Ohio letter writer, and a lot of people have covered this already, that's fine. It was first brought to my attention when I was a kid. I saw an Unsolved Mysteries episode on it, and I actually rewatched that episode, or that clip of it, that section of the episode, in preparation for this, and a newer newscast on it, and then some generalized reading that I've done around the internet. Circleville, Ohio is probably a 4-hour drive from where I live. And I was at an event over the spring here, and the event said they were going to Circleville, and it kind of sparked, I was with someone, and I said, hey, Circleville, you ever hear about this? And they had never heard about the Circleville letter writer, so why not, me bring it up? So, Circleville is a very small town in Pickaway County. Sorry, I'm going to look at my notes here from time to time. In Pickaway County, Ohio. And the population at the time this event took place, when it started, it happened for decades. But the population was like 11,682 or so. And that was in the 70s. And the event started in 1976. And what happened is a person, or persons, were sending letters to people in the town that were often vulgar and sexual connotations in them. And when I say letters, I don't mean like one or two. We're talking thousands of letters over the years. So it really became a big deal. So what really kicked it off was a woman by the name of Mary Gillespie. She was a school bus driver in town. She is thought to have gotten one of the first letters. The letter she got was basically telling that, I know you're having an affair with the school superintendent, and that you need to knock it off or I'm going to expose it. And so Mary was thought to be the first person to get one of the letters. Now, the letters are postmarked, basically, the letter writer said he was stalking them, or the person was stalking them, and it was postmarked from Columbus, which is north of north of Circleville. It's, there's a lot of noise going on in town. People are letting off fireworks. Sorry. Anyways, so 8 days later, or within 8 days, her husband Ron got one talking about the same thing. And apparently she hadn't told her husband, or at least that's how the Unsolved Mysteries episode took it. And it said his life was in danger unless he did something about the affair. So that's how it all kicked off. That was one of the first big cases that was basically brought up about the letter writer. Of course, other people got the letters as well. But the main focus on the case is to do with Mary, her husband Ron, and some other interesting things that we'll get into here in a second. So, basically the letter that Ron got said that the person, again, was threatening to go public with the affair if something wasn't done about it. And so Ron and Mary talked with Ron's sister, and Ron's sister's husband which would be Mary's brother-in-law. His name was Paul Freshour, and Paul brought his sister, and they were all like trying to make an arrangement, and somehow they sent a letter back to the person. I don't know how they sent it back. That part was never explained. And they were basically saying that, you know, we know who you are and stuff, and that seemed to work for a little bit, but then it didn't. And then Friday, August 19th, 1977, it was 73 degrees that day. Yes, I looked it up. Ron got a phone call. And the call, no one knows what was said on the phone or anything, but it confirmed Ron's suspicion as to who he thought the letter writer was. He left his kids at home and told them he was going to confront the person. He took off in a pickup truck that the family owned, and the letter writer had written in a letter saying that they were watching that pickup truck. Now, Ron was not known to be drinking that night, so this comes into play here as well, because after he took off in the pickup truck that was referenced in the letters, it was a short distance from the house at an intersection Ron traveled quite a bit, or he knew it very well. His truck was found crashed into a tree, and Ron was dead inside. And between leaving the house and hitting the tree, the gun he took with him had fired one shot. Now, nobody could ever figure out, you know, what happened there. And the sheriff had a suspect that passed a polygraph, is how the story goes, and he had let that person go, and that was the only person that they had suspected of any foul play with the letter writer. And the sheriff then ruled it basically an accident, that Ron had an accident. Now, it is interesting, though, that the amount of the blood alcohol level in Ron's system at the time was 0.16%, which is about 1.5 times the legal limit at the time. But Ron was not known to be a heavy drinker, so I don't know. So the sheriff, though, actually is kind of interesting. A little side note, the sheriff of the county, of Pickaway County, was Dwight Radcliffe, and he is actually on record as being the longest-serving sheriff in U.S. history. He served from 1965 through 2013. He was the sheriff, which is an interesting. And this whole letter writing thing was all under his umbrella. And yeah, basically he was kind of like, nope, this is an accident. But then other people in the area afterwards got letters, and the letter writer was saying that the sheriff was actively involved in a cover-up of this whole event, Ron dying and stuff. So it gets really messy. So 6 years go by after Ron's death, and in 1977, let me make sure I have my, okay. No, okay, I have that wrong. Yeah, 6 years after Ron's death in 1977, Ron's wife and the superintendent both admitted to having an affair, but claimed it started after the letters, not before. So, I'm telling you all this because this case is really interesting. Sorry about the jump cut. Dogs were making noise. People were running around outside. Anyways, like I was saying, this case is interesting because it seems to go back and forth quite a bit. Back and forth. You know, the letters, you know, you're having an affair. We're not. But then later, we were, but it started after the letters. Ron's crashing his truck, but he had booze in his system. But at the same time, his gun was fired between the house and the intersection. There's a lot of just crazy stuff in here. So in 1983, Mary is still a school bus driver to support her family. And on her route, she sees signs on the side of the road. And it's kind of a normal occurrence then, like being hassled. But then one takes it too far and starts targeting her daughter. And so Mary is kind of mad about this. So she pulls her school bus over the side. And she goes and pulls down the sign. Well, attached to that was a string, and the whole sign, everything was on a post. and there was a box on the back of it. So she takes the box back into the bus, opens it up, and there was a pistol inside. And so the sign was basically a booby trap, knowing that she would pull it off and it would shoot her. Now, the serial number on the gun was also rubbed off, but not in a good enough way to where the experts in a lab were able to basically pull the serial number back up. And it ended up belonging to her now ex-brother-in-law, Paul Freshour. So Paul basically was brought in by the sheriff, and he was like, I haven't seen that gun in ages. So the sheriff basically, Paul's like, the gun, I haven't seen it in ages. I have no idea where it is. I've been, basically, it's not mine. I didn't do it. So the sheriff has him copy the letters from the Circleville letter writer and trying to do the exact same form, which isn't the proper way to do a testing like that. Trying to mimic someone's handwriting, because he made him like copy it, like looking at it and copying it, and then had him write out stuff. And the ones they said that they used were the ones that that he didn't, mimic, the ones that he just wrote. Anyways, so Paul then took the sheriff to his house after he does his test. He did the testing because he thought it would help out, or at least he says he thought it would help out, in capturing this person. Took him to the house, shows him where he kept the gun before, and after that, they went back to the courthouse. At the courthouse, the prosecutor told Paul that he was under arrest for attempted murder. And so then, he was tried for this basically attempted murder with the booby trapping of the sign. During the trial, it came up that in 1982, Paul Freshour's wife went to Mary and told her that she suspected Paul was the letter writer. And I thought that was another interesting tidbit. Now keep in mind, we're going to have another back and forth kind of thing here. This case is not clean cut. It's crazy. To quote Keeper of the Dead, the book, it cuts Occam's razor to shreds almost. So basically, the sign was also found on a Monday, and that Monday, Paul actually had off from work. But he did have an alibi for the time. Keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. We're going to circle back around in Circleville. He was basically found guilty, and he of attempted murder, and he was sentenced anywhere from 7 to 25 years in jail. So basically, it's your classic, you're going to serve 7 years, then get opportunity for parole. And, once you're allowed on parole, then you're out. But until then, you're going to serve at least 25 years. That's how I understand it. Because that comes into play because Paul, after 7 years, he was eligible. And he was denied because the letters continued. Now, keep in mind, here's the thing. While in prison, the letters were continuously being sent still. Paul was then placed in solitary confinement, and they still continued to be sent. They were even postmarked in Columbus still, even though Paul was in Lima, Ohio, over 200 miles away. Yeah, so 200 miles away, nowhere near Columbus, letters are still being sent. So when it came time for Paul to be up for parole, the number of letters actually increased. And he was denied the parole because the letters hurt him. Even though he had no way of getting them out of jail, they were still being sent. Now, that's not to say he couldn't be having someone, help send them. But we'll get into that later at the end. And so, even though they weren't coming from the Lima area, he was still denied. And then the letter writer actually sent Paul one and saying he'd never get out of prison. They didn't want you. Crazy stuff like that. So the reason there were some things, though, that were brought up in the trial that, not brought up in the trial, that should have been. A journalist actually uncovered evidence in the sheriff's file that wasn't mentioned in the trial, but probably would have cleared Paul's name. This is another back and forth kind of thing. One was that another bus driver, 20 minutes before Mary was going through there, saw a yellow Camino parked at the side of the booby trap with someone in it, or actually outside of it, looking like he was going to the bathroom, keeping his back to the road. And the person, the description had sandy hair. Paul Freshour doesn't have sandy hair. And Paul's alibi was, he was with someone at that time. He had an alibi. And also a suspect, and this lead was never followed, but there was a suspect that had a brother that did have a yellow Camino. So someone they suspected of being the writer or involved with the booby trapping had a brother who had a yellow Camino, but they didn't follow it up. They didn't look at it. They just found, oh, this is Paul Freshour's gun. He's got to be the guy. So in 1994, Paul Freshour did get out of jail. He served 10 years in prison. And he has maintained his innocence up until his death. It looks like he died in, I believe, around 2012. There were a couple of conflicting years, but I think it's 2012. Now, Dwight Radcliffe, up until his death in 2020, maintained that Paul Freshour was the letter writer. And Martin Yant, who is a private eye, a private detective, who has looked over the whole thing more recently, maybe back in around 2012-ish or before 2012, said that Paul was framed. He was not the letter writer. So there's a lot of people, a lot of experts weighing in either way. And finally, in the mid-90s, the letters did stop, although some were say they were claiming to still receive them through 2001 to 2003 even. But the last official date is around 94 when Paul Freshour did get out of jail. And, but yeah, Paul Freshour died in 2012 at the age of 70. And to this day, the actual letter writer has never been found. The police said it was Paul. Paul says it wasn't. So, my opinion on this is a really good case. I don't know. I'm not privy to 100% of the information going into the case. But, you know, there's a lot of things. Paul's gun was there. You know, that's a mark against him. However, they didn't follow up on the lead with the Camino. Could somebody have broken into Paul's garage and grabbed his pistol? That is possible. Is there a reason they were harassing the person in the first place? I don't know. Sometimes it could just be a nut with a pin. You know, it was the 70s. What else were they going to do? This whole case, I feel like there's probably some information the public hasn't been told, and that's why they were so heavy on Paul Freshour being the writer. That's very possible. That's kind of stuff happens in crime all the time. The public is not being told stuff. Not to get into current politics or, well, not politics, but current things going on. My wife's been talking about this whole Free Britney Spears thing. And I tell her, you know, she's like, well, this person can do this person can do that, but yet Britney Spears can't. I said, you know, honey, I know it looks bad on the surface, but I've got to think there's something going on that the public's not being told about that matter. That's what I feel about the letter writer. There's something not right with the whole thing. There's something we're not being told. Either they knew who this kook was, or it was a group of people, or something going on. Was Paul Freshour framed in my mind? I don't know. It's possible. I wish they would have followed up on the Camino story, like, you know, what was going on there. And what about Ron's death? Where did the fired bullet come from? How did they know that the bullet was fired? Was the gun warm when they touched it? Was something else going on? Obviously, it was a revolver, so there was, you know, an empty shell. Maybe he fired it at another time, target practice, and never took an empty shell out. That's possible. So there's a lot of things we don't know. The letters did stop in 94, which is when Paul got out of prison. You know, was it a case of, hey, you know, me and my accomplices, let's stop doing this. I've had enough trouble. They're not messing around. I don't want to stay in jail. Completely possible. I really don't know what to think about this case, other than it's confusing. I bet the people involved are glad it's over. I bet the families are glad that both sides are not being harassed anymore over this whole matter. That part is good. But yeah, there's just so many odd things going on with this story. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. So go out, do some more research, look up the Circleville letter writer, and come to your own conclusion. And share it in the comments below. Let me know what you think happened in this whole event. Was it Paul Freshour? Was he framed? Was it someone else? That's the beauty of it. We can have a great discussion down in the comments. And go ahead and obviously like the video if you like this kind of a content, or if you want me to make more true crime stories, if there's some kind of true crime you want me to cover, or anything else. Next episode, we're going to be talking about one of the rock bands that has what people often say, and I didn't know this, that this was the thing. I didn't know it was considered the worst song of all time. We're going to talk about Starship next episode, and how I don't think the song We Built the City is the worst song ever made. I used to kind of not like it until I learned more about it, and more about the group Starship. I always liked their songs. But yeah, we're going to talk about, you know, Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship, all on the next episode. Should be a lot of fun. Show you some of the vinyl in a video maybe in between. Don't know what my schedule is going to be like. But yeah, so tell me below what you want to see. Tell me what you think. Is Paul Freshour the letter writer? Was he? Was he not? And so, yeah. I guess I'm going to say this has been a good Dishn with Andy, in my opinion. No, why don't you come on over here and help me try. Everybody, have a good one.